What's up, my fellow plant geeks? Today I have kind of a special request for my Florida friends. But before I get into all that, I need to go ahead and give some background info. What I mean here with background info is that I am going to be doing a gardening project down in Florida sometime in the next few months. And this particular project has some serious... And I'm in a bit of a conundrum with this particular project. And really, I don't even know where to begin to explain how complicated the situation is. So for starters, I'll just give a little bit of background on why I'm doing this project and kind of an overview of who I'm doing the project for. Now, I know this family, husband and wife, who just relocated to the Panama City area, and I am going to be very vague with information about them because they're a military family. I do have to specify they're a military family because they move frequently. Now, these people have always lived someplace where they could not really garden. It's always been too cold. The last place they lived, I believe it snowed like all the way through late May, and then they'd have some summer and it'd start snowing again in like late September. And they have always wanted to have a garden. And as of now, they're back together after having just spent a year apart. So I want to go ahead and give them a garden for free. I don't want this to cost them anything. I'm not made of money, however, so much of what I am going to be doing down there is going to be from divisions from my garden up here in St. Louis. Title of this channel is Tropical Plant Party. I have lots and lots and lots of plants that I can divide and take down there. In fact, a lot of the plants that I have in mind to grow down there for them are cheaper here than they are there because they're sold up here as annuals and house plants. And as a general rule of thumb, perennials typically pretty much always cost more than annuals. House plants can get kind of pricey, but if I'm just going to run to Lowe's or Home Depot, I can pick some crotons up for very cheap. I think these were like $8. As opposed to them being, probably around 30, maybe 25 down there because they'd be sold as a perennial. However, where they live, this is zone 9A, so crotons are out of the question. And their requirements for what they want in their garden are very specific, and it's making this difficult, which is why I'm reaching out to everybody who lives down there in Florida, North Florida, or even Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, the southern parts of those states, anywhere from 8B to 9A, who can maybe give me some suggestions. I've been in contact with a lot of the nurseries down there, and I'm getting very mixed information about the climate. I mean, I know, zone 9, I can figure the minimum temperatures and everything, but I really need to know more like what the average winter heat is like, because that's more determinant in how things will grow. For example, one of the requests is she wants to grow hibiscus. Well, I feel like that's going to be a marginally hardy plant. The Hibiscus rosa sinensis is probably better off in zone 9B and 10, but there might be a warm spot in the garden where we could pull that off. They might just have to be potted up and brought in the house too. There's really no way to know. They don't know. They just moved there. And from talking to the nurseries down there, some of the nurseries sell hibiscus as perennials, and some of them say, no, you can't grow those here. So this is part of the conundrum that I was talking about. So some of their other requirements, I'm just going to go ahead and try and lay them all out right now, because that'll make it a lot easier to get suggestions from everybody. One major requirement is that the plants are drought tolerant. Now, I've been following the forecast down in their area for a pretty long time. I mean, it is Florida, and they are not far from the Gulf at all. And it looks like it rains there pretty much every single day. There's a chance of rain every single day, at least. That being said, I don't really know how important it is that the plants are drought tolerant. But the area they live in has a brand new fancy water plant or something, so their water bills are very expensive. And we could get into doing rain barrel gardening, and probably will, because they also want a vegetable garden, and, that's going to need water. There are going to be times of the year where it's not raining every single day. So we'll do a rain barrel for that particular aspect of the garden. But as far as everything else, their yard's fairly large, and they do not want to have to water things heavily. As a general rule of thumb, when you plant something new, you need to make sure that they're watered well consistently until their roots are established. So that's one of the big things. The plants need to be something that can basically handle some neglect, because they don't know how to garden, but they've always wanted one. This will be the first time for them. However, things like cactus will not work. Anything toxic will not work. One, because they have a dog that is quite feisty, and they will likely be adopting children within the next couple years while they're there. So, and probably not babies, probably toddlers or older. So they don't want anything that they can get their little fingers on and eat and become sick. So all of these requirements, you can see that the list is really getting narrowed down here as far as things to grow. Another major thing, they have zero shade. There is no shade in their yard. From what I can tell, it looks like whoever lived there before did some landscaping there, some saw palmettos, the Sereno and although those are native, so they could have just been there. It looks like there might be a very small peach tree, maybe 4 feet tall, but there's no shade. They would like some shade, and I really think getting the shade is going to be one of the hardest parts for them. Reason for that is, when you only live someplace for 3 or 4 years, that's how things go in the military. You can't really just go out and buy like a 20 or 30 foot tall tree, especially when this is all being done for free under my penny. And I don't have that type of money for this sort of thing. I'm trying to do this as cheap as possible. And I don't think the nurseries down there probably even have 20 or 30 foot tall trees. One of the options I've been toying with have been palm trees. Now, palm trees typically don't offer a ton of shade unless you plant them in groups. But they can be fairly cheap. But the nurseries down there, like I said, are kind of wacky from what I can tell. I haven't actually been able to go there and look through them. I haven't talked to every single nursery. I've just been in contact with a few, trying to get like wholesale price lists and things like that. But the majority of them, actually all of them, I can't seem to find any that sell queen palms or that stock them consistently enough to say that they'll have them. And the queen palm would be my first choice because they're cheap. They grow reasonably fast. They're not terribly messy, though I think they're very dusty. What doesn't make sense to me, though, is that a lot of these nurseries also sell Bismarckia palms and Chinese fan palms and things that are not as hardy as a queen palm. So I'm a little bit confused as what the queen palm situation is. Maybe there's this particular time of year when they're stocked better, but I think the queen palms would be the best option for the shade because, like I said, they're clean, they grow quick, they're cheap, they're somewhat drought tolerant, and they have a pretty widespread canopy. And if you were to plant probably 3 of those, then you'd get a decent amount of shade from that. The other palms they offer are like Washingtonias, this is the Mexican, or the California fan palm, or maybe the hybrid between the two. They have, obviously, the sable palmettos, but that's not a great option when you're only going to live someplace for 3 or 4 years because they're sold as sticks that have no leaves. They've been hurricane cut. So those aren't going to provide any shade anytime soon. And they have a really tight canopy, so I don't really know what they would do for shade anyways, unless you have a lot of them. And then they have a lot of date palms, but date palms are very expensive if you want large ones. I'm talking thousands of dollars, and they're messy. Very, very, very messy. So that's not an option either. So if anybody knows of any other palms that might be common to the area that are cheap and, easy to grow, that would be a helpful suggestion. Like I said, there's going to be a vegetable garden put in here. I'm probably going to do it in a raised bed. I think the vegetables will just do better in gardening soil instead of the sandy soil. But as far as other plants go, plants like the philodendron, this is the philodendron, the Shalom philodendron, or philodendron bipinnate ficata, is that how you pronounce it? I don't know. Split leaf. Large philodendron, they get big. I'm going to be doing a whole different video on these guys. But they should be hardy there. Online, some places say don't grow them any colder than zone 10. Some say there's zone 8. There's the philodendron hope that's fully hardy through zone 8, but stays a small shrub. I have planted them in my yard, and they've died during the winter and come back for me, and I'm in zone 6B. So I'm confident that they should be fine, unless they have a terrible winter. Another option would be gingers. Gingers are great. So far, I have several gingers ready to go. There are foxtail ferns, Texas sage, but I really need more variety than this because the majority of the plants I just mentioned, except for the Texas sage, really are not drought-tolerant plants. But maybe them being drought-tolerant doesn't even matter. That's why I'm reaching out to my garden friends. And I did try and explain to them that, you know, doing a cactus garden in a climate where it's hot and rains every single day probably isn't going to work. And, well, they don't really want cactus because they're sharp and prickly, and there will probably be little ones running around. And their dog's been up here before, and it jumped right into my patch of prickly pears. So I don't think that that's a great option. But, you know, there's yuccas, softleaf yuccas, the regular, just too sharp probably. Drexenias, cordylands, and whatnot. Those might work well too. Okay, so all that being said, the main requirements are somewhat drought tolerant. They need to be plants for the sun because there's no shade in their yard. Non-toxic, not sharp, and low maintenance. Any suggestions you have, I would really, really, really appreciate. Just because I want to get as much diversity into this garden as possible. I only have so much here that I can divide and take down there with me. And it just makes more sense to pick the plants up down there than to drive them down there. Oh, and I do know that there will be several crepe myrtles planted, though I'm not certain what size they'll be by the time I can get them planted. You know, when I'm going to be doing the landscaping down there, it's not the ideal time to be planting things. So it's probably going to be a multi-step project where there will be some things I'll go ahead and plant because it's okay to plant them, and then I'll be returning in the spring to do the rest, and maybe early summer. All right, so thanks everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you already haven't. Comment below, and please, 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 please let me know what you think will work well. Some suggestions for cheap, easy, non-toxic plants that are safe for kids. And that's all I got for today. Keep on growing, everybody. Bye-bye.